This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Adam Lang.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, Adam, of course, our weekend show is different to the weekday shows. Here we are, each nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, which is what I always find the hardest because you're trying to pick something that is kind of flying under the radar a little bit. And we're also looking for our favourite story. Every week we are joined by an adjudicator, and obviously with Sean Aylmer on a well-deserved break and you, Adam, stepping in to take me on, we need a new judge. And this week we are very fortunate to be joined by Tim Burrows, media commentator, the founder of Mumbrella, and now the managing partner of the newsletter Unmade. Tim, good morning.
Hey, good morning. And I was told that you only get the invitation to do this twice with Fear and Greed, once on the way up and once on the way down. And this is my second appearance.
Well, the thing is that Adam has been judging us for some time now, and he has started to apply some rather unusual criteria to judging each category. And the most alarming part of this whole episode is that about a minute before we started recording, Tim, you asked Adam for some advice on the judging criteria and the point scoring and everything. So I'm worried that Adam has now infected you with his completely irrational and arbitrary judging decisions that he makes. Can we be assured of an impartial decision today?
Look, I do sometimes think that Adam is insufficiently harsh. I seem to remember it was only a week or two that you called him a goose and he almost let you get away with it. So I'm thinking of introducing some sort of yellow card and red card system for umpire abuse.
See, Michael, I have so much to learn. Bring it on.
I actually don't like the way this is going. I was hoping, Tim, that you would be kind of an ally to me in this, but it feels like you have instead sided with Adam. So I'm not going to make any declarations of impartiality so early on, more than I just did. Let's jump into it. Let's look for the biggest story of the week. Adam, would you like to go first?
Certainly. In the midst of a fast-moving economy, high inflation, rising interest rates, the transition to green energy and an uncertain economic environment, we have seen spectacular merger and acquisition deals come through into the frame. This week we saw Coronado Global Resources end merger talks with Peabody, Perpetual reject a bid from Regal, and Perpetual asked for a delay for their bid for Pendle. Then later in the week came a bigger deal. Origin Energy backed an $18 billion all-cash takeover offer from Canada's Brookfield Asset Management and US-based EIG. The $9 a share bid was a whopping 55% premium to the stock's close on Wednesday, and if successful, the bid will see Brookfield take the power business and EIG hold the liquefied natural gas operation. Big deals make for the biggest story this week, and the Origin Energy-backed all-cash offer of $18 billion, a 55% premium from Brookfield and EIG, has to be the biggest. Michael, over to you.
Oh, that is big. And my favourite part of that was actually the way you psyched yourself up at the start of it. You took about a second and you could almost hear this deep breath going, all right, game face, let's do this. Look, I agree. The M&A activity this week has been fairly significant. I'm obviously not going to agree with you that it is the biggest story of the week. And if we'd been having this conversation on Thursday, I would have been telling you about the big bank results this week as being the biggest story, NAB and Westpac's profits, their dividends, the warnings that they were issuing, that rate hikes are affecting households, and the risk of inflation expectations becoming entrenched. But then on Friday, the biggest story of the week landed in the form of softer than expected inflation data out of the US, the world's biggest economy. Annual inflation slowed to 7.7% last month, which is the lowest since January. Analysts declared that it was essentially building the case now for the Federal Reserve to moderate its interest rate hiking path. The impact of this data was immediate, and it was huge. It really kind of feels like investors might have just been craving some good news. In the hours after the release, the S&P 500 soared 5.5%. That is the best first day reaction to a CPI report since records began in 2003 and probably long before that. The Dow Jones climbed 3.7%. The tech-heavy NASDAQ shot up more than 7%. US 10-year bond yields dropped. The Aussie dollar jumped. Stellar results on Wall Street flowed through to the ASX. This is the biggest story of the week, possibly of the month, because it could be the beginning of a wave of economic optimism, and coinciding with the midterm elections and the clarity that a result actually gives to markets rather than the uncertainty leading up to it. It makes this story undoubtedly the winner, the biggest of the week. Tim, did I put enough mayo on that one?
This is a tricky one because I do like a lot the argument that Adam is making. I think Origin Energy as an M&A counts double really because it's not just important in business terms, but society terms, political terms. There's so much about the energy transition. So that's a big one. Inflation's important. I think the question I have is, yes, I acknowledge your excellent point, Michael, that the market has responded massively, but also we keep seeing it grabbing for hope, have these little bursts of exuberance, then get talked down by the Central Reserve again, and then it goes right back to where we started when everyone realised they got a bit carried away. But I do struggle to get past that number, that giant jump in the key indexes. So I'm narrowly going to give that one to Michael.
Thank you very much. If I had stayed with the bank story, do you reckon it would have been a bigger? I don't even know. I've won that one, so I don't know why I'm now trying to find out whether I would have had a bigger win if I'd stayed with the bank story.
Yeah, you can try and snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yes, I don't. I just, even as I was saying, I'm like, Michael, stop, stop talking.
Keep talking, Michael.
No, you know what? We are moving on. We are moving on very quickly from that one. That's the fastest you'll ever see me move on from victory. Most remarkable story this week. Can I go first on this one, Adam?
Please do.
All right. Well, I'm going to look globally for this one. I appear to be looking globally for most stories this week because I'm a big picture kind of guy. And really what we are looking at here is what's happening to the big tech companies, because three companies really in particular. Number one, Meta Platforms, the owner of Facebook. Meta is struggling with competition from platforms like TikTok. It is struggling with kind of falling demand for its digital advertising, the incorrect assumption that pandemic-level activity would continue, and consequently a share price that has lost something around kind of 70% this year. As a result, the company is undergoing its first restructuring ever that sees people losing their jobs. 11,000 people, 13% of staff losing their jobs. That is big. But as a percentage, it is still a long way short of what's been happening at Twitter. Half of Twitter's employees were fired a week ago as new owner Elon Musk, who paid $44 billion for the company, searches for both cost savings and new revenue. He's changing the subscription model and the way users are verified on the platform. And right now, that is all just a complete mess. What is going on that platform, and advertisers are pressing pause on campaigns. Absolute chaos, and you can't imagine that Elon Musk would be too happy with the way things have been playing out. The third company that is worth making a mention of in this category is Amazon. The e-commerce giant this week became the first listed company ever to lose $1 trillion in value. So its peak market cap was $1.88 trillion back in 2021, so about a year ago. This week, at one point, it dropped to a low of $879 billion. It's recovered then a bit since then. Mind you, it only just beat Microsoft to the milestone. It shows how much technology stocks have been hammered throughout this year. And in Amazon's case, really, as the e-commerce boom slows and costs and interest rates rise, as well as those kind of recession fears, put it all together, Meta, Twitter, Amazon, job losses, market caps, it's remarkable. Adam.
Well, Michael, that was a great land grab for all things tech. I'm going to go on a slightly different skew. And for me, Medibank hackers are evil, and their diabolical exploits to release personal medical data on the internet are truly remarkable. They are awful and remarkable. To me, it is so galling that this ransom as a service operation has released onto the internet details of drug addictions and HIV diagnoses, treatments for anxiety, even constipation and reflux. They have even split the data into what they called naughty and nice lists. Drug and alcohol abuse on one side and cataracts and colitis on the other. I would also like to give a special fear and greed commendation to the strong advocacy of Cybersecurity Minister Claire O'Neill, whose comments on our evil deeds included, quote, "I cannot articulate the disgust I have for the scumbags who are at the heart of this criminal act," end of quote. Disgraceful, deplorable, dastardly criminal and diabolical, plenty of superlatives to underline my disdain for our evil and their Medibank personal health data leaks as my bid for the most remarkable story of the week.
Tim.
Wow, those are two very remarkable stories, or I guess, Michael, in your case, three remarkable stories in Meta, Twitter, and Amazon.
Well, Sean Aylmer does it all the time, combines multiple stories into one.
I'm not judging you for it because, you know.
Well, you should be, because it is your job.
Well, that is very true. I was about to say hate the game, not the player, but I'm willing to make an exception in your case. Look, if you look at what we've been writing about on Unmade, Twitter in particular, it's a subject which has been very close to my heart. So I did almost wonder whether you'd just been looking at my website to see what I'd been writing about, Michael, but I know you're not as cynical as that, obviously.
Of course not.
And then, of course, Medibank is a huge issue. And, you know, when I sort of write about the communications world, I suppose I often see it through that sort of issue or lens of reputation, which is just a huge challenge for Medibank in the same way it was for Optus. So, two, absolutely remarkable stories. And there's no arguing that they both are. I'm going to give it to Michael, though.
I was not expecting it to go that way. And clearly the time I spent searching the Unmade newsletters from the week may have paid off.
It's worth bearing in mind, though, the scoring so far is very close. So the marks out of 100 might make a difference at the end of it.
Okay. Well, in an example of probably the worst imaginable tease for what's coming up in a second, when we look at the sleeper story of the week, I've got a terrible sleeper story. So I suspect I suspect I may lose some points on that
one.
Put
up the white flag already.
No,
give it a go, Michael.
Oh, I will. Okay, we'll come back in a moment and I will have a go at the sleeper story of the week. All right, Adam, we are looking for the sleeper story of the week. So this is one that's maybe flying under the radar a little bit, or is going to become a bigger story kind of further down the track. So it's a bit of kind of crystal ball stuff here. What is it for you?
Michael, this one belongs on the Fear and Greed record of honour, or perhaps just my personal quest for the beginnings of meaningful tax reform. Stamp duty has been one of the most derided forms of inefficient taxation for ages. And finally, this week, one brave state government took a progressive step. Until now, stamp duty rates in New South Wales are between 1.25 and 3.5%. They've applied and are paid to the New South Wales state government. So the purchase of a $1.5 million home would lead you to pay out $67,000 of your hard-earned, already taxed money to the state government for the privilege of buying your house. This week, the Dominic Perrottet-led New South Wales state government has passed a first home buyer choice law, and from today, it will give buyers of homes up to $1.5 million the choice to pay upfront stamp duty or a land tax of $400 plus 0.3% of the property's land value. So instead of that $67,000 in upfront stamp duty for a $1.5 million property, you could choose to pay an annual land tax of around $2,500. You get to choose. The first home buyer choice law is a great option for prospective homeowners. And as we watch other states look on and potentially compete with this much needed change, this is my sleeper story of the week for the good winds of tax reform that may come across our country. Michael.
I've never heard someone so passionate about tax reform. And you almost deserve bonus points for it.
I kept it reserved for that one. I'm really happy with it.
Goodness me. All right. So the sleeper story for me is there is a debate that's going on at the moment that we're not actually hearing that much about, and it concerns our superannuation. So we should be paying attention, considering that the sector is worth more than $3.3 trillion, and for most of us will be the single biggest investment that we ever own after, for example, the house that you live in. Anyway, the debate is over superannuation caps, how much super we should be allowed to have. The government wants to make sure super is being genuinely used to actually fund retirement and not just to kind of shield income behind the concessional tax rates that are attached to super before then being handed over to the kids kind of as inheritance. The cap might end up being kind of $2 million or $5 million or somewhere in between. And maybe this is why it's a sleeper story, because not that many people are actually going to trouble the upper limits of the cap. But how about this, just for a pretty cool stat? 11,000 people have more than $5 million in super. And if that money was invested elsewhere, there would be more tax going to the government. 30 or so people have more than $100 million in their super. That is a pretty spectacular retirement. It is a bit of a sleeper story, but we should be paying attention to any changes in super and participating in that conversation because it is just so important. Tim, do you agree?
Two big issues raised there, both around financial reform, interestingly enough. Starting with Michael's choice, I'm super fascinated what happens with this one, because it feels like the lobbying is just beginning to gear up from the kind of some of the super interest groups. But I find myself very interested in the topic because, it feels incredibly hard to justify some of these big amounts of money which sit outside of the proper tax system. So that's a good one. But I must admit, and these are words that I'm slightly ashamed to say, I am a big fan of tax reform. And it does feel like stamp duty does really need to be looked at. So fantastic that it's happened in New South Wales. It feels like a progressive move. There's been some political risk in it as well. And that's, I think, what I really admire about politicians is when they see a risk and they actually do it anyway for the general good. So two really strong sleeper stories, but I am going to give that one to Adam.
Oh, thank you, Tim.
I agree. I think that is a fantastic story.
So gracious today, Michael.
Thank you. I'm going to take that in the way it was meant, genuinely.
Today,
thank you. Let's move on to the favourite story. This is it. This is the big one, the last one. Favourite story of the week. I'll go first on this one.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so normally I would pick something that's a little bit entertaining or amusing for this category. Space is often a favourite if we've got kind of asteroids or something cool happening in space. But without any great space stories this week, I've settled instead for cryptocurrencies, which have really come back down to earth. That was where I paused for laughter and none came. Oh, goodness me. This week has been a bit of a shocker for crypto investors, with Bitcoin suffering some huge drops, more than 20%, before a bit of a kind of a late week recovery as kind of financial markets everywhere surged. But consider this, a year ago, Bitcoin was trading at almost $70,000. This week, at one point, it was around $16,000. That has got to hurt if you are a Bitcoin trader. So I mentioned that there was a big recovery late in the week as the financial markets kind of everywhere was surging. But if you rewind a couple of days, you can see that behind the trouble for cryptos really is the collapse of the crypto exchange FTX following really a liquidity crunch. Clients were just pulling Bitcoin out very, very quickly. They withdrew $420 million worth of the digital token in just 4 days. Rival Binance agreed to take over FTX. Binance started due diligence and then walked away very, very quickly, which is not a good sign of whatever is going on there. It does get a little bit more complicated because FTX had issued its own crypto tokens, which were being used then as collateral for loans from other crypto lenders. And so then with FTX in a huge amount of trouble, no one knows who owes what to who can pay what, and who to actually talk to about what is owed. So the end result is kind of chaos in crypto markets. It is a bit of an odd choice for my favorite story of the week. It is just, I think I like it just because it illustrates something that we have talked about a lot over the last couple of years, which is this ongoing volatility in cryptocurrencies and why it is just such you need to have nerves of steel to be an investor in that space. Adam.
Okay, Michael, my story is about the prospect of improving relations. China is the second biggest global economy and Australia's largest export market. And since Malcolm Turnbull last chatted with Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2016, China has also been the source of a progressively strained international relationship that has cost us trade harmony and billions of dollars. Next Tuesday and Wednesday, Bali will host the 17th G20 Heads of State and Government Summit, where 17 world leaders, including President of the United States Joe Biden, will meet in person, while Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky are expected to join via video link. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and China's President Xi Jinping will attend the meeting, and this week we learned that there is a chance that they might actually have a face-to-face meeting on the sidelines. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says nothing is finalised, but that any meeting would be a positive thing. When billions of dollars of Australian trade are at stake, it sure would be a positive thing. And for me, the prospect of improving relations with China is my favourite story of the week. Tim.
Oh, a couple of very strong arguments there. And I think before we get to the verdict, it's worth making the point that although Michael leads 2-1, I'm just looking at the scoring so far, and because of Michael's slightly weak sleeper story, you're both sitting on 69 points each. So everything is left to play for.
Comes down to the last topic.
It does come down to the last topic. So let's start with China. I mean, I think that is genuinely a business story. We've seen all of the problems for businesses wanting to export to China. We've seen all of the problems for inbound when it comes to things like education to the Chinese market, be that, unarguably a big and important story. I also love the crypto story though, because there are so many shady people in crypto. I know there are people losing money who don't deserve it, and there is this fun implosion. But yeah, crypto winter, that feels like a very memorable thing. So let's give it to Michael.
Thank you, Tim.
3-1 to Michael.
3-1 to Michael, and in absolute points, 94 points to 92.
Oh, that is close. That was very close. That was good fun.
I have so much to learn, Michael.
You got to say, there were some big stories around this week. It's been a big week for business news.
Yeah, and we needed a great judge, Tim. So thank you very much for doing it.
Always a pleasure and never a chore.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was Tim Burrows, media commentator and the managing partner of newsletter Unmade. Head to unmade.media to sign up. It is a fantastic read and is full of tips on what may end up being the biggest story of the week. And thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Tim.
Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And do not forget to check out our new podcast, How Do They Afford That? Featuring Canna Campbell, the founder of Sugar Mama TV, all about making your money work a little bit harder for you. I'm Michael Thompson. Have a great weekend.